2, and 1. Economics is not a question about right or wrong. Economics is a question on what is useful and what is not useful. There is a reason why it isn't a part of STEM, just by the very nature of it being treated as somewhat distinguished from that discipline. We think we can literally nuance this debate based on the very strong frame that Joseph gives in his speech, which I don't necessarily think was tackled properly by side opposition. What is this debate really about? I think two things. The first is on which side is able to ground economics to be a lot more useful, because economics has a real world impact, and the side able to utilize it to a better capacity will be a lot more successful in winning this debate. The second thing this debate is about is just on which side is able to make economics far more equitable, or at the very least far more cognizant of external factors that affect it. Given that, as to what LO said in their speech, is just a lot more subject to change. I think that so far, opposition does not really debate, at least when it comes to responding to the specific critiques we lay out on their side. One, the big claim of opposition is that they say economics needs to be precise in order to be useful. Note that this is not something that is really comparative or something that's up to debate, because on either side of the house, you'll still use the scientific method. Like, even if you're taking up a philosophy or a history degree, the same level of scientific rigor is expected from you. You just use different techniques. And if you really think about it, that is literally how economic research right now is proliferated and supported. One of the most recent Nobel Prize awardees for economics literally got recognized for her interdisciplinary work detailing how women affect the labor force and the gender pay gap. I forgot her name, but it's a real thing. Search it up after this round. The point is, the lens by which opposition chooses to look at this debate is heavily misunderstood at the point in which they assume the end goal of economics is the math and the models, when it isn't. The main goal of economics is to assess and deal with change. That is why Joseph's speech is particularly important, as he explains the priority, or like how the priority needs to be more focused on the external realities that we can use to understand each and every particular type of situation, not just the math and equations that exist behind it. Opposition uses a lot of buzzwords and terminologies without really responding to us or proving their case. At best, they try and say that some of the things we say are symmetric and not exclusive, but they don't explain how they can hijack that for their side. We have proven exclusivity, at least insofar as more than them. The next big thing that Deputy says is that we create false dichotomies on our side of the house. Again, I think this is more of opposition's failure rather than ours, because Joseph preempts this in his framing. As to what he said, it's a debate about extent, not a binary. So math and statistics will still be used on our side, the same way they'll probably also use qualitative metrics on their side. But the key difference is on where importance is put, because Deputy is really unclear about where their stance actually is. The key difference on our side versus their side is the metric of usefulness is a lot more precise, ironically enough, on ours, given that it is centered around a more holistic lens, because market behavior has a lot more to deal with where you are born or the circumstances surround where you are as a person rather than a mathematical model. Opposition asserts that objectives equals precise equals good. However, the DLO says and admits that behavioral economics uses objective forms of measurement. That is a principled concession that planning is different from execution. This debate is not about where we have or whether or not we have objective metrics, but about the primary lens of looking at politics. First clash then, on the usefulness which PM and LO talked about. Joseph gives a very clear setup. Right now, we see economics as something that is equal and unchanging regardless of where you are. But as he correctly points out, obviously there is a lot of variability and problems that come across or that comes as a result of this. Economics, when you are a Muslim, is obviously going to be different from economics when you are African, which is also different when you are in South America. We think it's just a lot more useful, not when you prioritize on the variable change. We think it's just a lot more useful, when you prioritize on that particular variable change and on the nuance particular to each demographic for a couple of important weighing metrics. On use cases, side opposition is very limited in what they are able to teach, since their major metric of measurability has a skew towards math and statistics. That is the inherent problem that Josephs points out and Ella emphasizes. Because if they choose to measure things out by the book, or at the very least majorly by the book, it leaves out the bigger picture of how culture and society and perception change market behaviors of each individual type person and each group pertaining to that people. Secondarily, on perception, you are just far more capable of becoming more well-informed when your priority is about understanding the complex realities and how each specific subgroup exists and react to different things, not just when it comes to that mathematical model stuff. Again, I want to emphasize that this is already a core part of economics, given that you necessarily have to deal with the different classes. It's just that on our side, you give that analysis particular importance to be able to give a lot more useful understanding that people can use. Why is this something debate winning? Joseph's contribution is debate winning precisely because of the same metric that LO gave in their speech. If you want economics to be more useful and to be cognizant of the many changes that exist in the world, it's only when you fixate on the external stuff that you actually attain that benefit. I'll take the POI before 6 if there is one. Okay, cool, none. The second clash, very quickly, is just on discrimination and equality. I want to note the importance of Ella's extension because I don't think it's enough for Deputy to say it's a false dichotomy to get off scot-free from their lack of a rebuttal. Ella mechanistically proved that economics has a lot more of an incentive to care not about these minority groups. And that is an inherent problem because as to what they point out or what my partners point out, all these people also deserve the same kind of rigor because of, the fact that they're human. That is to say, on our side of the house, you are just probably more likely to deal with all of those like humanistic aspects or all of those social studies and interdisciplinary practices associated with all of those particular minority groups as a consequence of you having to do with a lot more focused on people or at the very least having a skew towards that particular point of people. This is particularly important because of the fact that you are not just able to have a better use case for economics, you are going to target a lot more of that use cases to the people that necessarily need it more. That is to say, on our side, you just get a lot more research pertaining to those particular groups of people, which is probably going to be good because now that's a better avenue for them to help or to be helped. For all of those reasons, I think opposition loses this debate. Thank you.